This is your World War III update. The Polish Foreign Ministry are advising their citizens who currently reside in Russia to leave that country immediately. And the question is, why now? Why after 3.5 years are they now emphasizing repatriation? I would encourage you to watch the video I released yesterday, which is a synopsis of all of the events that have unfolded in the past couple weeks, aggravating factors that appear to be setting the precedent for some convergence of hostilities sometime in September, which of course will be at the tail end of Trump's 50-day ultimatum to Vladimir Putin, which we're currently at about 41 days remaining. However, the spokesperson for Trump, Catherine Leavitt, today reminded us that just because we've issued a 50-day ultimatum doesn't mean that it can't hit the fan within 50 days, for better or for worse. We have also drawn parallels on the channel between that and the ultimatum given to the Ayatollah, in which he was given a 60-day ultimatum. On the 58th day, they tried to decapitate the entire leadership. Now, were they to attempt that with Vladimir Putin, of course, it would have nuclear implications for us all. So we hope that's not what they're attempting. However, they've sent out signals that they, in fact, are preparing for that very thing. Now, I also indicated in that video yesterday that they're going to use a lot of politically divisive and diversionary tactics to take attention away from these geopolitical tensions which are percolating. Chief among those will be the task force on the declassification of government state secrets, which is essentially an endless vat of meaningless red herrings and rabbit holes that they will dole out to the population in the run-up to Day X to keep attention away from things that actually matter and get you chasing ghosts. That's the whole purpose. If it's not Epstein, it's Obamagate, it's Russiagate, the list will go on. They'll keep pumping out this stuff, Martin Luther King, thousands upon thousands of documents to occupy the minds of internet super sleuths abroad so that you don't focus on what's really happening, which is a massive armament of Europe for a major war that has nuclear implications for the rest of the world. Now, the Polish Foreign Ministry has officially advised its citizens to leave Russia urgently, as indicated. The formal reason is a reduction in the number of diplomatic personnel and limited possibilities for providing assistance in case of some kind of emergency. However, people are skeptical of this explanation. It could not be just a warning, but rather a signal of upcoming provocations or possible attacks converging in and around this period of time in September. There's a lot of political controversy unfolding in Ukraine today, and like I've been saying for the last few videos, Seymour Hersh has predicted that Zelensky is going to go, and it appears as though we might be seeing the nascent phases of a movement to oust him. I don't believe it's a grassroots movement because I believe the goal is to implant Zelensky in his place for when shit gets real. Now, they're suspecting possible provocations on Russian infrastructure in the coming months, and European politicians and military officials have already hinted at expanding military operations, including strikes on Moscow and other key targets. Of course, if you've been following the channel, you're well aware of the fact that the German government has committed to providing Ukraine with these long-range weapon systems, in addition to the ones they already have. And of course, NATO is the one who is providing the ISR and the networking, the Starlink satellites that are helping navigate a lot of these drones above and beyond the AI visual recognition systems. LAVROV today, Sergei Lavrov, who always tells the truth, whether you like the guy or not on a personal level, it doesn't matter. He always foreshadows what's going to happen. He says that any interventions that the German Minister of Defense is now threatening us with, declaring that we will be ready to kill Russian soldiers, according to the German Minister of Defense, the declaration of the NATO leaders that they're going to preemptively crush the Kaliningrad region, as NATO Commander Donahue recently stated, they're going to be leveraging a Palantir Maven technology to do some sort of blitzkrieg maneuver to take out the Russian exclave. This probably sends a very alarming signal to any, I emphasize, normal person about what plans are being prepared in Brussels, Berlin, and of course Paris and London. That really requires a reread, okay? Because this is the guy who 6 months, and the Russians have great intelligence, 6 months before it was ever even being discussed that they were going to be sending long-range weapon systems. He said they're going to do it. He said that they're going to greenlight deep strikes into Russian territory. He said that it's very likely that change in administration won't reflect a change in foreign policy, and here we are. The war is worse than it's ever been. I must read this again because it's very imperative that people listen to this. This is Russia's top diplomat saying this, and you really need to pay close attention. He has said, the declarations of NATO leaders that they are going to preemptively crush the Kaliningrad region, which is exclave of Russia. This probably sends a very alarming signal to any, I emphasize, normal person about what plans are being prepared in Brussels, Berlin, and of course Paris and London. He's saying that NATO is preparing to go to war with Russia and that there are going to be dire consequences for humanity if they proceed with this. Interestingly, Epstein has been deferred to September. Isn't that interesting? The U.S. House of Representatives postponed the vote on the resolution recommending the release of documents in the Epstein case until September. Whose legal case has also been deferred till September? Is it Netanyahu's? Oh yeah, that's right. A lot of stuff just coinciding in September. Russia is replacing WhatsApp. It appears as though they've learned their lesson from the Iranians who were using WhatsApp and being tracked by the West. Duh. If you have Western software on your phones after the Hezbollah pager attacks, then I don't know. Darwin's got your number, okay? The Kremlin is preparing to ban WhatsApp and introduce Max, a government-developed app that will come pre-installed on all digital devices in Russia. Interesting. Pre-installed. I talked yesterday about the martial law being imposed at the ports. They're checking every single cargo container vessel that comes to port. I don't know how they're going to do that. That would be a massive undertaking with these major ports and major shipments that are coming into Russia. But the FSB is going to be doing that. So they're going into full-on war mode. They're preparing for day X, okay? They're putting it, and it's really, I think, less about getting rid of WhatsApp and putting their app on the phone to track people, okay? And so this is going to be a litmus test. Here in the West, we have so many apps on our phones that the government can backdoor. It's enough to make your head spin. So if you have a phone at all, you're screwed when the World War III lockdowns begin. Officially presented as a messaging and service platform, Max reportedly enables extensive surveillance of users' communications, financial activity, locations, and internet browsing. They're also increasing penalties on people who are looking up extremist content online, whatever that means. The West is not immune to this level of crackdown. Google announced today, YouTube in particular, the removal of nearly 11,000 YouTube channels and other accounts tied to state-linked propaganda campaigns from China, Russia, and even more in the second quarter. I wish they would get rid of some of those content farms that are stealing content like this channels and just re-uploading it, changing the background, utilizing AI technology, altering the voice a little bit, jump cutting a little bit, and presenting it as their own content. The sad part of it all is that it's not so much that they're doing it, it's that millions of people are watching these videos thinking that what they're seeing is from the original creator, which is a testament to how uncritical and docile mentally we've become. According to Ukraine's unmanned systems commander, he had an interesting warning for NATO, and I'm not sure if this was a veiled threat or what. Ukraine's unmanned systems forces commander, the guy that oversees the drone tech. At NATO, they asked my opinion on their security of their bases. He said that I said 4 Ukrainian FPV teams could turn it into Pearl Harbor in 15 minutes without coming within 10 kilometers from the facility. Cheap, accessible tech in the wrong hands could upend Western military plans. That is the warning. There was a controversy yesterday with the U.S. Army releasing a video that was boasting about the ability to drop a grenade from a drone. I believe that that post is being largely misunderstood. For starters, all of the training that Ukraine is getting, there are NATO officers in there that are collecting that data. Not only collecting data on the servers in terms of the actual data, but also in terms of human intelligence, collecting that experience and in fact directing a lot of the operations there. So the idea that NATO doesn't know how to drop a grenade from a drone, and I think if you actually look at the wording of that post, they took it down, which I think was a bad idea. It just sort of lended credence to the notion that they're incompetent and they actually thought that this was something revolutionary. Well, if you actually looked at the wording of the post, it appeared as though they were trying to intrigue the public in order as like a recruitment tool. Like, do you want to see a grenade drop from a drone? They know full well, and because they have been the ones who've been commanding Ukrainian forces by and large. Okay, so let's not kid ourselves about the fact that, you know, people say, well, NATO doesn't have the same fighting experience as Russia. Yes, in some ways, but they have the officers who are on the front lines studying everything that is going on there, who ultimately will be directing NATO forces. And of course, a lot of those Ukrainian forces will now be beholden to NATO and assisting them when the conventional war, if it ever gets to that point, before just going immediately nuclear, expands into the Baltics and other places in the intermaritime states. Ukraine is in turmoil today, and there's protests happening. But these protests, something about these protests, they seem a little too vanilla to a critical eye. They just seem a little too passive for a Ukrainian protest. We've seen what a Ukrainian protest looks like in 2014, or a Maidan coup, as some people like to call it. But this just seemed a little too soft and a little too textbook, if you know what I mean. It appears as though Seymour Hersh will very well be vindicated in his prediction that Zaluzhny will be replacing Zelensky, the former commander of the AFU. And you put in a warlord when you know that shit's going to hit the fan and you need to win back the respect of the military. You get rid of Zelensky in the next couple months, and it appears as though this might be the nascent movement that is used to justify the ouster of Zelensky. Now, I'll tell you what they're protesting. Under Ukraine's new law, which restricts anti-corruption investigations, this was initiated post-2014, was supposed to purge Ukraine of all kinds of corruption. It just ended up being a tool to, of course, exact control over the government and become a dictatorship, essentially. Now, they're saying that they need to, that this is serving the interests of Russians, and that Russia is undermining Ukraine via this anti-corruption mechanism. So under this new law signed by Zelensky, he's putting these anti-corruption investigations under the control of a chosen, hand-picked government official instead of these independent agencies. This causes alarm that it could protect corrupt officials and weaken the fight against corruption during wartime. Who knows what the true motivation is, or did they just plant the seeds of their own destruction, or did they want to plant the seeds of their own destruction, and that this will be what is used as the reason for Zelensky's exit and the introduction of the new warlord in Ukraine, which will lead the charge to whatever sort of crazy shit they're about to do next, which is perhaps part of the reason why Poland and the Polish Foreign Ministry is calling for its people to return. The Russian State Duma is proposing year-round conscription, and a new port at Rotterdam, not a new port, but one which is a lot more active as of recent, appears to be preparing for large-scale military maneuvers. NATO's preparation of the port of Rotterdam for large-scale military cargo suggests not only active planning for a potential conflict with Russia, but also implies that such a war could begin within a relatively short period of time. Now, people often ask, how could Russia ever fight NATO in a conventional war without it going nuclear? What is NATO doing with these rapid response forces and the Schengen corridors and their preparations to put all of this conventional weaponry on target Why would they be planning for this when it's just going to go nuclear? Well, if the West is truly planting a strike against Russia's forces, a counter-force strike, as opposed to a counter-value nuclear conflict, which of course entails mutually assured destruction, blowing up all the cities. If they go for a counter-force approach, where they use a combination of asymmetrical tactics, conventional weaponry, and possibly nuclear weapons in order to do a swift decapitation strike whilst minimizing a collateral response from the Russians, then it could very well be that these conventional forces are not just going to be used to police the domestic population. In fact, these will be occupying forces, right? So when the dust settles, it's not so much that NATO is prepared to win a long-winded war of attrition against the Russians, not by a long shot. These forces, the size indicates that they genuinely are preparing to do some sort of swift maneuver, take out Russia. If it succeeds, it succeeds. If they can neutralize Dead Hand, great, then many of us don't die. Dead Hand is, of course, the automated system that launches all of Russia's nukes if their leadership gets assassinated. We've seen the prowess of their cyber capabilities as demonstrated by Israel. It was reported today that there were 20,000 cyber attacks on Iran that effectively neutralized their entire air defense system. Now, this is supposed to be a system that is air-gapped. Now, the Russians and the Chinese have firewalls in place for this. They have their own internet. They're tightly controlling everything. But you really need to ask yourself at this point in time, why is Russia disconnecting from the internet? Why are they installing all these apps on people's phones? Why are they effectively not closing the ports, but bringing them to a grinding halt, despite all of the economic immiseration that they're under with these sanctions? Why is Poland calling its people home? Why? Everything, September. Well, it appears that if something was to happen, I would not be surprised. I'm not saying that something is, but it appears to be the probability is quite high, considering they're deferring all of these hot button issues to be resolved by then. And even if they are, they'll never be resolved, of course. Of course, we have the delivery of nuclear weapons to the UK. I was going to comment on this a few days ago. I didn't think much of it, but I figured, it's a data point worth acknowledging. The US Air Force at the UK, who are going to be flying the tactical nukes that are now there in Lakenheath, I believe it's called. The F-35s that are going to be deploying these B-61 nuclear bombs, they were given a new patch or pin, and it's shaped like a nuclear mushroom cloud, and it features the Grim Reaper holding a skull and what appears to be a stylized B-61 thermal-gravity bomb, and below the image, the slogan reads, "Prepare to meet your maker." This is the actual image of it. Okay, this is the patch. Yeah, it doesn't want to focus. It got it for a second there. Anyways, you get the point. So, yeah, I wonder if those guys who are flying those planes have really thought this through. When I had Lieutenant Colonel Jay Block on, who was a former missileer, he said that there was all sorts of extensive psychological vetting that goes in to these people to make sure that they 110% will comply with the order when that order is given. And for some people, that's reassuring because it shows how formidable our nuclear deterrence is. But at the same time, you just have to wonder if it's part of the community to celebrate our destruction, then maybe, just maybe, that's not a good thing. I'm going to be doing a separate video, and let me just see if I have any more information to share with you with respect to this. Okay, yes, I do have one more piece of information, but I'm going to be doing a separate video on some new information that's been leaked about how the UK is preparing for a full-blown nuclear war. And it's really fascinating stuff. If you've ever seen the movie Threads, so I'm probably going to do that video right after this one, but I won't release it today. The Kremlin reaction to the US putting nuclear weapons in the UK. Now, oftentimes, silence is a negative proof in the sense that we haven't heard the Kremlin talk much about this increased nuclear posture, forward deployment of tactical nuclear weapons by the United States, in addition to everywhere else there already exist in Europe. So it's not like this is new, but it's just additive to the problem. And the Kremlin was quite quiet, and that seemed to indicate that maybe indeed they were just quietly preparing for day X. Well, they commented on this today. The Kremlin rejected calls for a nuclear powers summit, accusing the West of escalating tensions through militarization after reports of U.S. tactical nukes being deployed in the UK. The Kremlin condemns the report of the U.S. deploying tactical nuclear weapons, calling it a part of Western militarization. Well, duh. Spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Peskov, says there are no grounds for a Nuclear 5 summit, citing deliberate Western escalation. Western policies are undermining stability and dialogue, he claims. Putin's 2020 proposal for a nuclear-powered summit is now considered unviable by Moscow. And the Russian security agencies are actively monitoring and adjusting their posture in response to these new developments. That means we descend down the DEFCON ladder. Folks, keep on prepping. Enjoy that summer while you can, but just keep your head on a swivel. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.